Hello, I am Ryan.
Hello, I am Amy. Welcome to Listen to English Podcast.
Today's episode is How to Argue in English Confidently. And we are so glad you're here with us. Arguing is something that we all do, whether we realize it or not. It's part of life, and especially when you're learning another language, knowing how to express your thoughts and opinions clearly when they're different from others is so important. So let's dive into that today.
Yes, let's. And first, it's really important to be clear about what we mean by arguing. We don't mean shouting or fighting. We're talking about expressing your opinions and supporting those opinions with reasons in a respectful and constructive way. It's about having a healthy exchange of ideas.
Exactly. We're not talking about those times when things get heated and maybe voices get raised a little bit. It's more about just being able to share your point of view and knowing how to back it up with good reasons, especially when you're speaking in English, which for many of our listeners might not be their first language. So our aim today is to equip you with some phrases and expressions that will help you to disagree confidently and politely in English.
Yes, and we're going to break this down into 4 key areas. How to start an argument politely, how to give strong arguments, how to disagree politely, and how to end an argument nicely. So let's start with how to start an argument politely. This is really important because the way you begin a disagreement can really set the tone for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, it's like that first impression, right?
Right.
You want to make sure that you're coming across as respectful and open to hearing the other person's perspective. It appears that one of the biggest mistakes people make when they want to disagree is to be too direct and to say something like, "You're wrong." Now, in some cultures, that might be acceptable, but in many English-speaking cultures, that can be seen as rude and confrontational, and it can immediately shut down the conversation.
Exactly. You don't want to make the other person feel like you're attacking them personally or that you don't value their opinion. So instead of saying something like, "you're wrong," there are a few phrases you can use that are much more polite and diplomatic. One of my favorites is, "I see your point, but I think." It acknowledges the other person's perspective while also signaling that you have a different view. The "but" is key here because it creates a smooth transition to your own opinion.
I like that one too. It shows that you're listening and that you're taking their ideas seriously. Another one that you can use is, "I understand your opinion, but I feel that." This is especially useful when you want to express a personal feeling or belief. The word feel really emphasizes that it's your subjective perspective.
Yes, and that can be important because sometimes in disagreements, it's about more than just facts. It can be about values or personal experiences. A third phrase that can be helpful is, "I respect your view, but in my opinion." This one is particularly good when you're talking about a sensitive topic or when you really want to emphasize that you value the other person's perspective even though you disagree with them. The "I respect your view" part is key because it creates a sense of mutual respect right from the start.
Right. So let's say someone says, "I think social media is bad for people." How could you use one of these phrases to start an argument politely?
Well, I could say, "I see your point about social media having some downsides, but I think it can also be a great way for people to stay connected with friends and family who live far away." Or I could say, "I understand your opinion, but I feel that social media can also be a powerful tool for sharing information and raising awareness about important issues." Or I could say, "I respect your view, but in my opinion, social media has the potential to bring people together and create positive change in the world." See how all those phrases acknowledge the other person's perspective while also introducing my own.
They do. They're much more effective than just saying, "No, you're wrong."
Okay, so now that we've talked about how to start an argument politely, let's move on to our next key area, how to give strong arguments. Okay, so you've started your argument politely, but now you need to actually back up your opinion with strong reasons and evidence. A strong argument has 2 main parts, your opinion and a reason that supports that opinion. For example, if you say, "I think chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream," that's your opinion. But to make it a strong argument, you need to add a reason like, "because it's rich, creamy, and delicious." See how the reason makes the argument much more convincing.
It does. So what are some phrases we can use to introduce those strong reasons?
Well, one really useful phrase is, "the main reason is." This clearly signals to the listener that you're about to give your most important reason for your opinion. For example, let's say you're arguing that people should use public transportation more often. You could say, "I think people should use public transportation more often. The main reason is that it's much better for the environment than driving a car."
That makes sense. And it helps the listener to really focus on the key point you're making. What's another phrase we could use?
Another good one is, "I believe this because." This is a good way to introduce a reason that's based on your personal experience or knowledge. For example, you could say, I believe that learning a new language is one of the best things you can do for yourself. I believe this because it opens up so many new opportunities for travel, communication, and personal growth.
Okay, so we've got the main reason is, and I believe this because, what's one more phrase we can add to our toolbox?
One more that's really helpful is, one example is, this phrase is perfect for introducing a specific example or piece of evidence that supports your opinion. For instance, if you're arguing that exercise is important for both physical and mental health, you could say, I think everyone should make time for regular exercise. One example is that studies have shown that even moderate exercise can improve mood, reduce stress, and boost cognitive function.
Those were all great phrases. So let's give our listeners a chance to practice using them. Let's imagine that we're discussing whether or not schools should ban homework. Think about your own opinion on this topic and come up with one strong reason to support your view. Then try using one of the phrases we've just talked about to introduce your reason. For example, if you think homework is beneficial, you could say, I don't think schools should ban homework. The main reason is that it helps students to develop good study habits and time management skills. Or, if you think homework is unnecessary, you could say, I believe that schools should ban homework. I believe this because it puts too much pressure on students and takes away from their free time.
Exactly. Just remember to state your opinion clearly and then follow it up with a strong reason that's introduced by one of those helpful phrases. Okay, so we've covered how to start an argument politely and how to give strong arguments. Now, what happens when someone disagrees with your argument? How can you respond politely?
Right, because it's important to remember that even if you have strong arguments, not everyone is going to agree with you. And that's okay. Disagreement is a natural part of any healthy conversation. The key is to handle it gracefully and respectfully.
Exactly. So, let's talk about some phrases that you can use to disagree politely when someone challenges your viewpoint. One of the simplest and most effective is, I see what you mean, but. This phrase acknowledges the other person's perspective while also signaling that you're about to offer a different view. It's like saying, I understand where you're coming from, but I see things a little differently.
I see what you mean, but. That's a good one. What's another one?
Another useful phrase is, that's a good point, but I think. This phrase acknowledges the validity of the other person's point while still introducing your own perspective. It's a way of saying, I see the merit in what you're saying, but I also have some thoughts to add.
That's a good point, but I think. Okay, what's one more we can use?
One more is, I understand, but another way to look at it is, this phrase is helpful when you want to offer a completely different perspective or frame of reference. It's like saying, I've heard your side of the story, but let me show you a different angle.
I understand, but another way to look at it is, I like that one. So let's practice using these phrases. I'm going to say an opinion, and then you can try disagreeing with me politely using one of these phrases. Okay, here goes. I think everyone should wake up at 5 a.m. every day.
Okay, well, I see what you mean about wanting to get an early start on the day, but I think that waking up at 5 a.m. is just not realistic or healthy for a lot of people. Different people have different sleep needs and schedules, and for some people, waking up that early would just make them exhausted and unproductive.
That's a good point.
Huh?
Okay, let's try another one. I think all cars should be electric.
That's a good point about wanting to reduce pollution and reliance on fossil fuels, but I think we also need to consider the practicalities of a complete transition to electric cars. The infrastructure isn't quite there yet in many places, and electric cars can be prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. We need to find solutions that are both environmentally friendly and economically feasible.
You're right, that's a very important point to consider. Okay, one more. I think everyone should learn to code.
I understand the argument that coding is a valuable skill in today's world, but another way to look at it is that not everyone needs to be a programmer. There are so many other important skills and talents that people can contribute to society, and we should encourage people to pursue their passions, whether it's coding or something else entirely.
That's a very good point. Okay, so we've covered how to start an argument politely, how to give strong arguments, and how to disagree politely. Now let's move on to our final key area, how to end an argument nicely.
This is important because even if you disagree with someone, you want to leave the conversation on a positive note. You don't want to end the conversation feeling angry or frustrated. It appears that leaving an argument on a positive note can even help strengthen the relationship between the speakers, as it demonstrates mutual respect and a willingness to engage in healthy debate.
You're absolutely right. It's all about maintaining those relationships and showing that you can disagree without being disagreeable. So, what are some phrases we can use to end an argument nicely, even if we don't completely agree with the other person?
One really good one is, I see we have different opinions, and that's okay. This phrase acknowledges the disagreement while also emphasizing that it's perfectly fine to have different perspectives.
I see we have different opinions, and that's okay. That's simple, but it's very effective. What's another one we can use?
Another good one is, we may not agree, but I respect your view. This phrase emphasizes that you value the other person's opinion, even if you don't share it.
We may not agree, but I respect your view. It shows that you can disagree with someone without disrespecting them. Okay, what's one more?
One more that's always nice to use is, it was a good discussion. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. This phrase shows that you appreciate the conversation and the other person's willingness to engage with you, even if you didn't reach a complete agreement.
It was a good discussion. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's a great way to end on a positive and appreciative note. Okay, so let's try using these phrases in a real-world scenario. Let's say we've been having a lively debate about whether coffee or tea is the better drink.
Okay, let's say I've been arguing passionately for the superiority of tea, and you've been just as passionately defending the merits of coffee. We've gone back and forth, and it's clear that neither of us is going to change the other's mind. So I could say, well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. It was a good discussion, though. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
And I could say, you too. We may not agree on which drink is better, but I respect your view. And hey, maybe we can both just enjoy a nice cup of something warm and caffeinated, whatever it may be.
Exactly. And there you have it, a perfectly polite and respectful way to end an argument, even if you don't see eye to eye. So there you have it. 4 key areas for arguing confidently in English. Starting politely, giving strong arguments, disagreeing politely, and ending nicely. We've covered a lot of ground today, and we hope that these tips and phrases will be helpful to you in your future English conversations.
We've given you a lot to think about and practice today, so remember the key is to always be respectful, thoughtful, and to use language that helps to build bridges rather than walls.
And just to recap, remember those key phrases we talked about throughout this podcast? They'll really help you to navigate those potentially tricky conversations where opinions differ. And the more you practice using them, the more confident you'll become in expressing yourself clearly and respectfully in English.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to English podcast and that you found it helpful. And as always, we encourage you to keep practicing your English and to keep having those important conversations.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in our next podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.